Today's video has kindly been sponsored by myself and my own webshop, hsMVY.shop. If you're looking for scale modeling supplies like paints, kits, and all other things alike, go check it out. We've recently gotten in a couple of new shipments from Scale Production, Highlight Model Studio, No. 5 Paints, and a new shipment is underway from Streetblisters as well. Some Tamiya products have been restocked, and I've also added the XF range of paints to the lineup too, and a lot of Aoshima and other kits are currently and constantly being restocked and refilled. So please go check out my webshop hsMVY.shop and help support the channel. For this little project video, I will be using the new Whale 3 Ultra from Nova 3D. This is a 14K resin 3D printer, really high quality and a pretty decent build volume as well. For the printing, I will be using their Mecha resin, and that is where all of the parts will be printed in, and that is a really nice resin to use for scale modeling. It's really workable, not too hard, not too brittle, and it sands and paints really nicely. Now, I was not paid to say or do anything. They did give me all of the products free of charge, but they did not give me any additional money or forced me to say any specific things. These are all my personal opinions and what I found during the project, and that is what I'm going to show and share with you. If you've seen any of my recent 3D printer reviews, they're not specifically reviews, they're more use cases of the printers. Now in this case, I will be doing a project build on one of KrisBizzle's files. I found his site or page on Cult3D. He has a lot of awesome files for model cars, but he also recently started designing some model kits. In this case, I will be building and of course printing his motorcycle kit. Now this is a sort of custom chopper. He has multiple versions of this. I chose one of the two with some of the parts that I liked most. So all of the parts were then loaded into G2 box for slicing and of course adding all of the supports to them so they can be printed. And for the settings, I just used the standard settings that Nova 3D added to G2 box. I did, however, adjust a couple of things. The normal layer height that I have set is 0.06, which is quite thick for a resin print, and I like to have them nice and thin so the layer lines are pretty much invisible. So I turned that down to 0.03. And also, since the layers are a little bit thinner than the 0.06, I also put the curing time per layer down to 2 seconds instead of the higher that they had themselves, as the layers are a bit thinner so they don't require that much time to cure in between the layers themselves. Now once the print has completed, I cleaned them up with some isopropyl alcohol, let that dry, and could then start removing all of the supports. Now the parts are not fully cured at this moment, so they will need final curing, but I like to remove all of the supports before doing that, as otherwise they get a little bit brittle and hard to remove. And in this case, you can still pull most of them off pretty easily, but if it's still a bit too hard to pull off, you can put them in some warm water just to soften them up a little bit. But what I like to do myself is just take out a hairdryer, put it on the high heat setting, turn that onto the part for a couple of seconds. That makes them nice, flexible, and really easy to remove all of the supports. So as you can see, after just a couple of seconds of warming it up, the parts are already nice and flexible, and the supports just really move around easily and also are really easy to remove at this point. Now also keep in mind, sometimes resin prints can warp a little bit, so if you want to straighten them out, you simply need to heat them up with a hairdryer or heat gun for a couple of seconds, straighten them to where you want them to be, or maybe even just bend them to where you want them to be, let them cool down in that position, and that is where they will stay, unless you of course heat it back up again, then it will go back to the original position. Now with that all said and done to all of those parts, they were moved into the curing chamber. I cured them for a couple of minutes on both sides and could then start prepping them for paint. The overall quality on most of the parts is really nice and smooth. There are of course some imperfections here and there due to me not putting the supports in the correct position, or maybe not even adding them enough, and all of those things, but that can be fine-tuned if you're working with the printer for a longer period of time. Now of course in this case I want the parts to be really nice and smooth, so all of the visible support marks left behind from removing all of the supports need to be sanded off, and also of course the general finish needs to be nice and smooth, so I'm going to be sanding all of the parts with a 400 grit. Now, keeping that in mind, that is quite a lot of work, so the finer you set the printer to as far as layer height, the less layer lines will be visible and the smoother the part will be. However, it will also take a lot longer to print, so that is something you might need to find a fair medium in between. So that is going to be done to all of the supports, and at least what is left of those, to get them all removed pretty much and get all of the parts ready for paint. Overall, at the 0.03 layer height, all of the parts were really nice and smooth and not that many layer lines were visible, so that is a really good sign of a quality printer and a quality resin. With some printers that are a little bit cheaper and a little bit lower quality, you do really need to get the finest layer heights possible so you have the least amount of layers, and usually when you get a thicker layer line or layer height, they will get a lot less quality, and in this case it turned out really nice and fine thanks to the 14K screen. Now, with that said and done, all of the parts are prepped and ready for primer and paint, and for that I will be using the new airbrush from Gaahleri. This is their Mobius. This one I'm using is the 0.3mm needle, and that is going to be used for all of the parts and all of the paints at the same 2 bar or 29 psi air pressure, and of course with that same 0.3mm needle. The parts were first primed with Streetblisters gray primer. I applied a couple coats to all of the parts and could then move on to applying the various different colors and shades of silver and black that I'm going to be using. Now, I do want to make a quick mention. You've probably already seen the thumbnail. There are some very questionable color choices that I have made on this build, and I'm not really happy with the outcome overall. Now, to be completely fair and honest with you guys, I did feel a little bit of pressure to try something new and not go with my gut feeling to go for a tried and trusted color scheme, but instead went with something maybe a little bit tacky and not that cool, but you live and you learn, and maybe I just need to get back to what I want to see and not what I think some of you guys might want to see, and get out of my comfort zone and maybe just crawl back into my comfort zone and do some of the things that I'd like to see. If you've been watching some of my recent videos, I have been given a couple airbrushes from Gaahleri and other companies to try out and share with you guys. Now, the first set of airbrushes that I received from Gaahleri were some of their startup products on the lower end, speaking of quality, but also on price point. So it's a really nice entry-level airbrush. Not the greatest quality, but really decent to get started and get your feet wet with airbrushing. Now, since then, they have upgraded their airbrushes and their game in general. They have created a new website and also came out with the airbrush that I'm using here, the Mobius. Now, this is a 0.3mm needle, and that is pretty much the best setup in general for 1/24th scale car modeling and the 1/12 scale motorcycle kits. It's specifically the kit that I'm building here. It has a really nice smooth spray, and the quality feels top-notch, even matching some of the more expensive airbrushes that I use in general. If you're interested in checking one of these out, I will be leaving links in the description down below. For the main two body parts, in this case the tank and the rear fender, or yeah, I think it's the fender, I used the clear blue for the finish, and for a lot of the parts that usually are chrome or silver or any of the other accent pieces in metal, I decided to go for a sort of candy gold. Painting it silver and then applying the clear yellow on top will give some sort of a goldy effect, and that is kind of where I went wrong. I did really like the blue, but I did not like the gold. Some parts were fine, but overall I added way too many gold parts that could have been silver or black to make it look a lot cooler, and then I also just messed up with the color for the seat and the handles or the grips, painting those in a light tan. I figured beforehand that it would look pretty cool, but after assembling it all, yeah, in my opinion, looked pretty awful. Maybe I'm going to be doing another one of these in the future, but I would just like to know what you guys think. What color should I have used, or is it not as bad as I think it is? So in the meantime, while you're looking at me doing the final assembly on this build, I did want to give a little bit of a review on the printer. First of all, the printer, it is a really nice high quality unit, feels really solid, and works pretty well. During the initial startup, I need to level the bed, and that was quite a bit of a hassle and not as easy as I've seen it on other printers before. Now, they do have some very clear instructional videos on their YouTube channel and on their website, but I didn't really find it to work out perfectly, and it took me a very long time to get the printer properly leveled and have all of the prints stick to the bed. And in the end, it took me about 10 to 20 tries of failed prints before I actually got the settings right and had the correct level. Now, that could all be down to me and my user error, but then again, I have used quite a lot of printers in my time, and I think I'm fairly experienced at this point, and it simply wasn't as easy as they think it is or make it look on their videos. It requires a lot of time, a lot of precision, and it just doesn't want to go perfectly, in my opinion, first time around, as most of the other printers that I've used so far did have. Then again, that is pretty much the only thing that I'm going to be complaining about, because after that is set, you can just forget it, leave it, and it is pretty much good to go for a very long amount of time. There is also a nice flip cover on top of it, which makes it easy so you don't have to pull it off, but it just stays on, flips up. However, it does require a lot of space in the back, so you do need to have quite a deep table or a shelf to put it on so it doesn't hit anything. Other than that, really nice printer, nice quality, and I would highly recommend you checking their website out if you're interested in getting one of these.